Chapter 5, The Whaling Ship. The captain of the ship made this entry in his logbook, Sunday, June 27, 1841. Sent 2 boats to see if there was any turtle, found 5 poor distressed people on the island, took them off, could not understand anything from them more than that they were hungry. So they went looking for turtles and found people. Okay. After boarding the boat, the 5 castaways were rowed to the most enormous ship they had ever seen in their lives. It was 180 feet from bow to stern, 36 feet wide with 3 masts, 100 feet high, flying white sails. It was so big that in addition to the 2 boats used by the turtle hunters, there were 4 more boats lashed to its side. Okay, so this is a picture of the boat. They didn't have cameras back then, so this is like a picture. That's the John Howland. That's the name of the boat. And they had never seen a boat that big. Okay. The group had been rescued by the seamen of an American whaler, the John Howland. The ship had set out from the port of New Bedford, Massachusetts, and had been a sea hunting whale for 20 months. The crew of 34 men was under the command of Captain William H. Whitfield. Only 36-year-old, he was nevertheless a seasoned old salt who had been chasing ocean prey for more than 20 years. Whitfield was highly respected, especially because, unlike other captains of the time, he did not believe in flogging, which is whipping. Instead, anyone who disobeyed orders was punished by having privileges taken away or by having money deducted from his share of the profits. And this is a picture of the captain. Okay, the captain, William Whitfield, ordered his men to provide clothing so that the castaways would change from their wet rags. For the first time in their lives, the rescued 5 wore shirts and pants with buttons and pockets. Buttons were unknown in Japan, where cords, strings, and sashes were used to fasten loose-fitting clothing. Pockets were also new to them. People at home carried small packages in their sleeves, tucked in sashes, or placed in the bosom of a kimono. The group was also surprised to see leather boots. In Japan, using leather or any animal product was against the law. Before bedding down on a floor below deck, they were served a supper. In addition to soup, they ate bread, a food they had never eaten before. I could live off bread. Bread's my favorite. At first, they were given their meals and confined below so that they would not interfere with the work of sailing and whaling. Although unable to understand the sailors' language, they easily interpreted their friendly attitudes and were very happy when, after some days, the captain allowed them to explore the ship. They were amazed to find a food supply of live chickens and pigs. Spare provisions, sails, ropes, harpoons, and hundreds of casks containing whale olive were also stored below. The oil represented the captain and crew's earnings from the whale hunts. Instead of wages, each received a percentage of the profits, known as a lay. The size of the lay depended on the importance of man's job. Ordinary hands could be rewarded with as little as 275th part of the profit of a voyage. Skilled workers received more. The captain, the ship's owners, and the people in the United States who had financed the voyage made the most money. And if the whale hunt was successful, everybody got paid. If it was not, nobody made a penny. Herman Melville, the great American author, worked on a whaler in the Pacific Ocean in 1841. The very same year, Manjaro and his group were on the John Howland. In Moby Dick, Melville detailed what life was like on a typical whaler at the time, reporting that of the grand order of the folio leviathans, the sperm whale and the right whale are by far the most noteworthy. They are the only whales regularly hunted by men. Manjaro knew that whales were caught in Japan by coastal villagers far from his home. Their hunting methods were very different from those on the John Howland. They worked from land, with sentinels sighting their prey from hills overlooking the ocean. When a whale swam close to the shore, hundreds of people went into action. At least 30 longboats, each rowed by 30 to 40 men, held enormous nets that were dropped overboard to encircle and trap a whale. After being blocked by nets, the whale was killed by harpooners. Then some men climbed onto the beast's back and others swam underneath to attach ropes from the monster to 2 boats that dragged it to shore. On the beach, the beast was butchered, packaged, and sold as food. Blubber, bones, and oil were often discarded. A killed whale was butchered for its value as food. The best cuts were set aside for the tables of the nobility. Until a whale was caught, Manjaro and his friends could not understand why there were 2 enormous brick ovens dominating the top deck. These were the ovens for cooking chunks of blubber, which is whale fat, which, when boiled, turned into oil. The carcass of one whale could hold tons of valuable oil. In those days, before oil wells were drilled, whale oil was used to light lamps, lubricate machinery, and make items such as soaps, perfumes, candles, and medicine. The Japanese did not know about the many uses of oil at that time. So here's a picture on the boat. These are the big ovens right here where they're cooking the whale blubber and turning it into oil. Let's see. And here's kind of a gross picture. It's them peeling the blubber off the whale. So here's the ship. Here's the dead whale attached to the side. And they are literally like pulling the skin off. Gross. Okay. Sperm whales' jaws, the mouth part, which could measure 20 feet in length, were hoisted on deck. The teeth were dug out with sharp spades, then stored to be sold later as precious ivory. Melville reported that the sea beast's bones were sawn into slabs and piled away like joists for building houses. These were made into gateposts, rafters, fences, and were also fashioned into furniture. The heads of right whales were often hoisted on board too. When pried open, the inside of their jaws could measure 20 feet long, 5 feet high, and 12 feet wide, a cave roomy enough for several men to enter. A right whale's toothless mouth was filled with unique treasures. Melville wrote that the lower lip would yield some 500 gallons of oil and more. The hundreds of boards of baleen that curtained the upper jaws to strain its food were used for making items such as buggy whips, carriage springs, canes, fishing rods, umbrella ribs, rakes, and stiffeners for women's corsets and hoops for their skirts. Whaling was a mammoth, high profitable business for 19th century New Englanders. Between hunts, the crews kept busy swabbing decks, constructing casks, repairing ropes, fixing sails, keeping things in ship shape. There was always a lookout perched on 100 feet above deck at the top of the main mast, watching for whales. So here's the picture. He's just chilling up there. Looks to me very unsafe, like you could just fall right off. Manjaro amazed everyone from captain to cabin boy because after a few weeks he learned to speak and understood English. He asked for the chance to climb the ropes to the top of the main mast and stand watch as a lookout. His very first time at his job, Manjaro spied a spout, the fountain of vapor made by the breath of a whale surfacing for air. He shouted the traditional, "There she blows!" a call that brought quick action. 4 boats were lowered, each with 1 harpooner, 1 skipper, and 4 rowers. They surrounded the ocean giant. They gave chase as the prey sounded by diving deep underwater. It could be an hour and a half before the whale came up to get its need of breath. Then the boats closed in. Harpooners hurled their weapons until the sea around them streaked red with blood. Secure with ropes, a wounded whale often pulled a boat for many miles before it collapsed and died. Ropes on the boat were used to drag and fasten the dead whale to the ship's starboard side. One man stood on top of the whale to attach a chain with a huge hook into its back. Then the carcass was cut into slabs by men who worked from the main deck with 20-foot-long razor-sharp spades. Using block and tackle, the rubber was lifted on board, where it was cut up into smaller chunks and boiled in the huge pots. So that's what that picture was, them pulling the blubber off and then boiling it, the last pictures we showed. The entire process fascinated Manjaro and his group, who had never caught anything larger than a sea bass. They admired experienced whale hunters who risked their lives fighting sea monsters. Not only was the boat's crew in danger when a whale was harpooned, but the John Howland was also in peril. Ships had been wrecked by infuriated whales. There was hardly a harpooner who hadn't heard about the awful fate of the Nantucket ship, the Essex. In 1819, it sank to the bottom of the Pacific after a headstrong whale rammed a huge hole into the ship's side with its head. Luckily, the crew had enough time to escape in their whaleboats. I guess you try to kill a whale, you better deal with it wanting to kill you. Manjaro was particularly interested in learning the skills needed to navigate a big ship. Captain Whitfield was so enchanted by the boy's brilliance and passion for learning that he taught him to read maps and lectured him in the art of piloting. At times, he handed over the helm to allow Manjaro the thrill of steering the ship. This was exciting for Manjaro and diverting because his heart ached. Leisure time was agony because he worried about his family and he despaired that he would never see them again. Captain Whitfield gave the boy a name easier for Americans to pronounce than Manjaro. Everyone called him John Mung. And so here's another picture. And you can see right here that says John Mung. So this picture was drawn by him. A lot of these pictures in this book were drawn by Manjaro.